Join the Cougar Collective today, your home base for all NIL opportunities, connecting student athletes, fans, and business owners. Join the 1890 Club for as little as $18.90. You can also make a one-time donation. And if you're a business, you can collaborate your brand. Also, drink the Old Crimson Legendary Lager brewed by Pike Brewing. Sales benefit the Cougar Collective. Visit cougarcollective.org. Go Cougs! Well, let's get to know Jimmy Rogers, the new head coach at Washington State, a little bit more. Right now, joining us, Kyle Sheehan. He's the host of the Splitting Hares Podcast, covering everything and all things JackRabbits football. And Kyle, not only podcast host and media star, but also played with Jimmy Rogers, played with him at South Dakota State. And so he knows him very, very well. Kyle, thanks for the time. Appreciate it. It's one of these weird things in college football. We were talking, you and I, before we started recording, that you're bittersweet because you lost a coach who's a very good coach, but then you're happy because he's going up the coaching ladders. But it's just kind of a weird dynamic that's going on in college football, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the big thing to bear in mind is, like, it's better to have loved and lost than to never have loved at all, kind of thing, especially when it comes to a small school like Brookings, South Dakota has in South Dakota State. And, you're going to see guys you build up, they're homegrown, that eventually spread their wings. It's kind of the nature of the landscape, like you're saying.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's find out a little bit about Jimmy Rogers Young. He's been the head coach there for 2 years, but obviously many years there before, player, assistant coach. Tell our audience, Jimmy Rogers, as a person and a coach, who is he?
As a person, there's nobody more intense and dedicated to whatever he sets his mind to. The powers that be decided to write on his heart that he was going to be a football lifer, which is kind of interesting. As our paths kind of crossed in the professional world, there were times I tried to recruit him into a sales opportunity with Exos, a human performance group that does NFL draft stuff. And he's like, man, I'm a lifer. I'm a football lifer. And this is when he was, lower on the totem pole as a linebackers coach. And I knew right then, like, he was going to be destined for big things in coaching. I didn't necessarily foresee how expeditiously he would ascend. But even back as a player, man, like, he was always looking for new and innovative ways to improve his game. He's a bit slight of frame. He's about 5'9", played at about 200. He'd probably be pissed that I only slided him at 5'9", but he competes in everything he does, whether it be getting the most calories in the cafeteria, or being the first one in, last one out in meetings. And he's just kind of infectious as a player to have been around. He kind of laid the foundation as a player first and kind of just carried that same mindset and same aura into his ethos as a coach.
You see him when he coaches on the sidelines. You see him as a former teammate when you guys played together. South Dakota State was back 2007 through 2011.
Yep,
you see that same intensity that he had as a player now when he coaches.
Yeah, it's kind of funny though. I've seen an evolution in him. The way he approaches things in preparation, scheming, how he wants to attack his opponent, specifically from the defensive side of the ball, but writ large, the whole offensive game plan as well. You'd think that he would carry that over and kind of, be an in-your-face kind of guy on the sideline, but he really acts in a neutral capacity, which I think lends itself to, like, very, very good discernment and a good mentality in terms of your team's mindset is going to go as your emotions go as a head coach. So I think that's something Coug fans should be encouraged by. And then also the fact that he's not afraid to get in the zebra's ears a little bit here too when he needs to.
Kyle, why do you think he decided now was the time?
That's a great question. I think there's a lot of unique constraints at South Dakota State. It's not the most accessible town to get into. When you look at the overall population, I think you guys in Pullman are around 32K. South Dakota State is 12,000 in a town with about 20,000, give or take, in terms of student enrollment all in. So when you look at that and you look at our biggest city being Sioux Falls, 50 minutes south, getting everybody to come up and fill up a 20,000 person stadium, you're talking about the entire town plus some change. And he was able to do that the last 2 years with building, coming off of Coach Stig, who's a great man and a phenomenal coach, a legend in his own right. He was able to kind of keep that momentum going. But as you look at the new landscape, you're going to see poaching, and poaching has happened. And then without having what I call no interest in leaving NIL, we are kind of slow to progress into that because God bless the people of Brookings. They are very proud. And what Coach Stig was able to do with his commitment to the program and that loyalty, I think that mindset kind of carries over into, well, all the players should want to be loyal, just as loyal as Stig and Coach Rogers were for so long. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there.
It's interesting the way that you describe Brookings. It's very, very much like Pullman, where Pullman right. is, it's an hour and a half, 2 hours away from Spokane. But, from its biggest city with the majority of the alums, Seattle, you're talking 5+ hours away, which, again, has been a problem to get people to fill out a stadium that's, just a little under 40,000. I mean, it's the hotel stay there. It's, it's a minimum stay. It's very expensive. And I'm just curious, I guess, having coached in an environment that sounds similar, but almost having more struggles, how do you think his time in Brookings will help him with his time in Pullman?
Well, man, just even going back to as a player, we had a concrete cinder block locker room where we would have to hang, fly guards just to capture them in the summer. Our socks were wet. We'd hang them in the rafters. That's as a player, right? And he bought in knowing all the constraints he had as a coach, things he had to recruit people to. Now, since we've had a great investment from some of our donors, Dana Dykhouse, the namesake of our stadium, and many other buildings, who's poured ridiculous sums of money for an FCS program, some of the best facilities around. So that kind of helped start getting the momentum in, but he was able to see that transition from trailers that were our meeting rooms, literal trailers that we refurbished, grandstand bleachers on the visitor side, and a trailer on top as a press box. So it's not, you don't hug the building, right? That's Jimmy and Stig's mantra. You hug the coaches and the players and the guys who are going to be at your wedding and friends, and they become your family. So in terms of overcoming odds, I don't think he's shy about that. Hence, he knows what he's getting into with Pullman. I think, Coach Dickert has had a relationship with Jimmy Rogers, having been on the staff with him as the safeties coach at South Dakota State. And I know he was very vocal about some of those constraints, but I think, in texting with Jimmy and congratulating him on the opportunity, he said, if I'm going to do it, now's the time to do it. And I need to be all in when I do it. So
what is their time spent together? What do you think did he lean on Jake Dickert for advice about taking that job, you think?
The football brotherhood, especially when you get into coaching and you work your way up and guys make the rounds throughout the carousel, they stay in contact. I mean, all the guys from the Stig tree, you look at Clark Lee, the head coach at Vanderbilt, who was Jimmy's position coach at South Dakota State. They talked consistently. Everybody gets together at the Football Coaches Association convention and they talk and they network. They're business minded too. I have no doubt he probably reached out to him in some capacity. I'm completely speculating there, but I think all in all, he was destined for bigger opportunity. It was just not a matter of if, but when. And this seems like a natural transition given the size, similarities of programs. And, when you guys are saving a couple mil on the salary side that are going to lend itself to possibilities on the NIL side, which is going to allow him to experience a bit more success, I think, sooner than later. Style
of play. Anyone that's watched South Dakota State played, I watched the North Dakota State game. I mean, it's physical. He's a defensive minded coach. What would you say his defense is like? And then we'll get to the offense, but he's a defensive minded coach first, Kyle. So let's go there. What does his defense do? How does his defense stand out among others?
Man, they are tenacious. And that's like, a buzzword in the defensive realm, right? But literally they play and are a perfect mirror of how he played the game. Physical and violent at the point of contact. They disguise blitzes as well as they bring blitzes. They're multiple in their defensive looks, which obviously is way more to prepare for an offense, especially a lot of these offenses you're going to see in the group of five now, the conference that you guys are in. So I think you're going to see a lot to prepare for from an offensive perspective. And then you're going to see guys that, roll in waves. If you're on the roster, you're going to be prepared to get your snaps when you're called on. And I think that's huge because it allows you to build depth and trust at the same time.
Offensively. Now, when you watch them play, it's there's something that I think a lot of Washington State fans are going to see that they've been a little grown accustomed to a little bit more the last few years was the use of tight ends. But the style of which they play offensively is very, very physical, a run-first attack despite being out of the shotgun, use of a lot of tight ends. That is so opposite of what Washington State football has been for the decade plus. Air raid, spreading people out, throwing the football. That's what they're known for. What is his offensive identity and what we have seen at South Dakota State and how they've operated? Do you think that same style trend and purpose of what they do offensively will carry over? Will he bring that same style to Washington State?
I'm not sure what he'll bring. I've got some intimations on the staff that he may assemble, and now there's some solid offensive skill position coaching and O-line coaches, and it's yet to be determined, obviously, who's going to be the OC. I think as much as football changes, it kind of stays the same. And what we've seen in the Missouri Valley, which is very hard-nosed football, they kind of loosely call it the SEC of the FCS, time of possession, ball control, and physical run game. And it all starts up front with the O-line. Coach Rogers was very, very close with Mason McCormick, who is now working himself into a Pro Bowl potential first rookie year with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And he was no stranger to wanting to build strength in the offensive line room, and knows that as the offensive line goes, your whole protection scheme and your run game goes. So it'll be interesting to see what he does.
Who do you think comes with him from the staff? There's been thoughts that the entire staff is coming. Then people said, no, maybe not the entire staff. Nothing has come out yet of who's coming with him. Who do you expect to come with him to Washington State, Kyle?
That's a tough one for me to answer. I really close to my alma mater still. I like being transparent. I think it's going to be a hefty bunch. I'll just put it to you that way. He's going to have his pick of what's in the cupboard, and I'll just say this. I think you guys are going to like what he assembles there in Pullman.
Do you think that style offensively, defense, you can kind of travel and really, their defense was so poor this past season. They just needed a complete overhaul on it anyways. If you build it up front, can you make that leap from that FCS level to that FBS level and, controlling the football, being more of a ground attack like they were at South Dakota State? How difficult do you think that is to translate that immediately?
Difficult for immediate translation is tough to say. I think it all depends on the guys you get, right? The Johnnies and Joes make it go, right? And so at the end of the day, what he's able to instill, if he can get the buy-in that he's consistently gotten over the past 15 years, I think that's the measure early on. As far as style of play, I'm very biased. I think you possess the rock, right? If you keep the rock away from prolific offenses, some that you've been accustomed to over the years in the pack, and then now where you guys are, I think if they can't touch it, they can't win. And Jimmy's got a deep, deep mindset of 10 points is way too many. And over the years, it was 17, let's aim for 17 a game. And he's like, well, 17 a game, why are we going to concede 2 scores? Like, that's unacceptable. So that's legitimately his mindset. Now, he's not going to come in to Pullman saying, I expect shutouts every week, but he's definitely going to set a standard like that. And I think as the defense goes, will determine a lot of the stylistic formula that they put in place.
Kyle, when this stuff like this happens, it's a coach leaves, and we saw with Jake Dickert, guys go with him, right? I know you've been in this position before. You were a college athlete, college football player. As much as you want to commit to the school, you really just commit to the coaches, I would think. You commit to the head coach and your position coach. So if they take a new job, you follow them. As great as the school is there a worry? How many of these guys do you think from South Dakota State follow him to Pullman?
Certainly a handful, I would imagine, because every competitor has a chip on their shoulder, no matter where they're from. They think the opportunity that they could have that lies in wait is going to set them up for greater success in terms of the pro domain. I think that he's going to get some guys. And from your point, guys don't commit to a sterile institution. They just don't. And no matter how much our fan base is disgruntled by potential clearing of the cupboards, I think it's just the reality that these guys go into their homes, they visit with their families, they develop them when they were overlooked, right? Because most of our recruits are overlooked. In this recent class, he got a bunch of 2 and 3 stars, which was very uncommon, right? And he's opened up different recruiting lanes to places we really had no business being in. And so I think the talent pool will be there, especially because you guys got that NIL backing.
Gronowski, the quarterback, is going to be the one that I know most fans at Washington State are going to be interested in finding out about. He's in the portal. He's the number 1 quarterback, I think last time I checked, of in the portal. Where do you anticipate him going? Do you think he's a fit at Washington State? I mean, is that too obvious, or are there other bigger schools that will be after him?
Mark's a fit anywhere he goes because Mark is an infectious leader. He just does the right thing. He says the right things. Comes from a great family. I'm pretty close with him and his family, so I will reserve judgment. But I'll tell you this: he could go anywhere he wants. He's got his sights set on the pros, I believe. But that doesn't mean the right thing couldn't change his mind. The right fit couldn't change his mind. I'd be shocked if he goes. I would.
Shocked if he goes to Pullman.
Yeah, probably. I don't know. But I would be, because he's done pretty much everything he can. He's consulted with, obviously the NFL guys that evaluate him. And I'm not sure there's much more left to be done. He's graduated. He's a grad transfer. So does he want to continue the education, the grind of school further? Or does he want to try a shot at the league?
Where do you think he go? NFL, where do you think he fits in? What round do you think he falls in?
In terms of winning a locker room, I think he could go anywhere. I do think he's a late round guy. I think there was some opportunities left on the table this year, but he's an absolute gamer when it comes to the lights shining brightest. I mean, he tore up Oklahoma State. Now they got torn up pretty good this year, but he tore them up and through the air, and then did the same thing to UIW. I think we had one receiver with 10 plus catches. So that's pretty wild. And when you look at his skill set, big play extension guy, obviously he has the arm strength. He's a smart guy. He's an engineer. So, sky's the limit for him. Where he lands, I don't even know.
What do you anticipate? I think the other name that most Cougar fans will have an eye on will be Griffin Wild, the wide receiver. He went in the portal, and then I don't know all the portal stuff, but I had what the designation, don't contact me, or which I guess would assume that he has his mind made up. I don't know. What do you think? Does he end up in Pullman, or are we again looking at someone who's just going to evaluate all of his options and try to seek maybe a different program besides Washington State?
Yeah, I think you're seeing a similar situation to Mark. I think he's just opening the doors for opportunity to emerge, and he's had a lot of suitors. I'm not going to lie. He's had Louisville, Nebraska, a bunch of different names being floated around. I think I even heard a little UNC, Bill Belichick interest. So, he's a player who possesses an uncanny ability to get open. And he's not necessarily going to wow you with his measurables, but he will wow you in between the hashes. And going up to a division leap here, he's probably a solid 2 right off the bat, a 3, but certainly has a lot of ceiling left to get into a dominant 1. So I'd be excited to see wherever he lands.
Hey, Kyle, going back to Jimmy for a second, what type of recruiter? How would you describe him? Yeah,
and cut from the cloth of a Saban type. And now when I say that, what I mean by that is he's going to open doors that you guys already have open, but also new doors. And he's not going to come in there like a used car salesman. He's going to say, hey, you're going to have an opportunity to compete. I'll develop you. And if you buy in, we'll go to places together that maybe you didn't see coming, or maybe you had envisioned all along. He's done it with Christian Roseboom, a kid out of, Iowa. overlooked, and now he's balling out for the Rams, and he's done it with countless other guys. Isaiah Stallbird, who's in the league for the Saints. He's done it with Dyshawn Gales, who was a converted quarterback to corner, and he had, pro opportunities. Don Gardner in Tampa Bay, he just one after the other. And, Adam Bach is poised to probably be drafted here too in the upcoming class.
What would you say his greatest strength is as a coach?
Just one, probably preparation. Like, I don't think I've ever seen someone prepare for anything like this guy does. And now you could say that probably about every single coach in this tier. But when I'm talking preparation, like, there will be everything accounted for. Special situation, what they're wearing on the bus, like every fine-tooth detail will be accounted for. And, leaving nothing to chance, which was Stig's mantra all the way back in the day. And Jimmy's just latched onto that.
His learning curve. What do you think his learning curve will be at the next level?
I do think there's some opportunity for potential game situation management of ebbs and flows, some strategic use of timeouts and things that we did see in the North Dakota State game, which I liked, the most recent one. His learning curve, this is probably really specific to Washington State. It'll be what he wants to unveil offensively, I think. Because it's one thing to be a savant defensively, but, now it's total package, and it's total package where the ante is upped a little bit. So it'll be fascinating to see who he brings in, and he will delegate. He's not a constrictive coach, and I think he allows his assistants to be free, and I think that will help success as well.
You think I'm just going back just to circle back to that. Do you think there's a chance, Ryan Olsen, I think it's Danny Freund, hopefully I'm pronouncing Danny's last name correctly, who are the co-offensive coordinators. Do you think that he moves in a different direction to have a different style? Or I know you said that, hey, I think most of these guys are going to come with him, but would those guys come, or would he pivot to something that looks different than what he ran at South Dakota State?
He's going to do what's best for cohesion first, I would say, speculating here, but you have to have, good coworker relationships. And in order to do that, generally it comes from guys, So if I'm shaking my magic 8-ball, certainly guys come. Now, the roles they have at South Dakota State, do those carry over into what they do at Washington State is the question, because maybe a little more experience is needed in different areas and different categories. But I think both of those guys you named are good options. Freund, especially, he was a co-OC this year, and I kind of wanted to see maybe take some of the training wheels off a little bit in the passing game or do some different things. Now, we were limited with our roster this year. We gave up about 40% of our production to the league or graduation. And so we had some constraints there. But in terms of those guys that you mentioned, I would not be surprised to see them in Pullman.
Kyle, this is great. You can check out all of Kyle's work. Kyle Sheehan with us, Splitting Hares. Follow him on X, and also check out the Splitting Hares podcast, where you can find that, I would assume, everywhere we can find one's podcast, correct?
Yes, sir.
Kyle, thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
We continue our Who is Jimmy Rogers episode here, talking about new head coach at Washington State, Jimmy Rogers. This brought to you by the Cougar Collective and Flat Stick Pub. Look at this guy. We've got Jason Gesser, 2002 graduate at Washington State, also the Pac-10 Offensive Player of the Year, to help us break down who is Jimmy Rogers. And I asked Gesser, would you take a look at the offense? We know what Rodgers can do defensively, but I wanted Gesser to take a look at the offense and to see how different this offense will be opposed to the one we have seen for a decade plus there in Pullman. Guess before we get into Rodgers, after Dickert left for Wake Forest, Ann McCoy had to pivot quickly, right? And there was lots of speculation on Vegan, the coach at Montana State, but ultimately she decides on Jimmy Rogers. One, let's go back to your initial thoughts of Dickert leaving to Wake Forest, and then the reaction that you had when you heard that Jimmy Rogers was the hire.
Knowing Jake, first off, and just everything that's taking place and how college football has changed so much. I mean, it's you never want to, I've taken feelings out of everything because it's become such a business, right? And one thing that you talk about all the other guys that have played there or been a part of Washington State, gone there. The one constant's going to be the alumni, right? Coaches, ADs, presidents, people who are in those power positions, they're going to come and go. This is reality, right? And so you try to take feelings out of everything, and knowing Jake and the opportunity he got presented himself, and with the question marks that surround, let's be honest, the question marks that surround our school, the question marks that surround the conference, what's going to happen, what's going to take place. I don't blame a guy for going and taking that position, right? So that is what it is, and then and having to go and, like you're saying, pivot and make that adjustment to where we are right now, and how that's going to go. I mean, I've never been in those shoes, but I've seen the back rooms of those places and understand what the questions that she had to answer and how quickly things had to go. So. What she's doing right now and going with Jimmy Rogers, and I don't know who was all brought to the table, who was the final three, who was, everybody could speculate. You hear what people put on boards and all that kind of stuff. I mean, geez, I had a bunch of guys hitting me up going, hey, are you going to come back? Are you going to come coach? I'm like, it's not going to happen, man. I mean, I'm pretty happy with the life I got now, and things are going well. But I'd never even had a conversation, but what my whole point is you just never know what the truth is out there, right? So, who those finalists were, who was interested in the job, who wasn't interested in the job, how that all goes. She has to sift that out within a short period of time, because, as you know, time is of the essence. And I don't know Jimmy Rogers personally, but I do know Ann McCoy personally, and I do know that Ann, it's her first big hire, and she doesn't want to miss. So I think she's going to do her due diligence and make sure that she has the right people in the room to help her out with that decision and ultimately make the right decision. So time will tell. So
not knowing it, much, I don't think anybody really Gesser knew much about Jimmy Rogers. I mean, his name really wasn't even out there. It was vegan. It was Mora. His name, it wasn't probably the last 24 hours or so before it kind of came out where he was now being mentioned. So, I think credit to McCoy of keeping things under wraps. If indeed, let's just assume he was the guy all along. She did a nice job of I think, deflecting and keeping it under wraps of who she was going to target. Now, we've had some time to digest the hire, getting to know him, read up about him, getting to know a little bit more about Jimmy Rogers. What's your reaction been since the hire now?
Honestly, I've had a couple guys reach out to me, and some. I'm not going to go and throw anybody under the bus or any names out there, but there's a lot of alumni that question a lot of this. I'm sure a lot of us are, right? Because number one, all he's really done is South Dakota State, right? It's always really known, right? I think he had a stint there for a year or two outside of South Dakota State, but besides that, that's all he's known. Number one. Number two, there's no tie whatsoever to Washington State, and a lot of alumni feel like there needs to be ties, or they need to have some kind of a bring back or things of that nature. And so I think that those two things, because there's a handful of guys that I'm sure resumes have more experience, more years, whatever it may be, having closer connections, have had previous experiences as head jobs or whatever it may be, and he's had a year or two of being a head guy, obviously years of being a D coordinator, a couple of years of being a D coordinator, but it's one of those to where the way that the game is going nowadays is they're going for younger guys because of their relationship with the players. It's not more of your experience, but what you can do as far as motivation, what you can do as far as player development, what you can do as far as keeping guys there, what you can do as far as running a business, in my opinion, because it is a pure business, and you got to go and retain players. You got to pay players. You're worried about NILs. You're worried about all these different things that are taking place, right? Now you're going to worry about roster size. You have a 105 cap roster. We're going to have a certain amount of pay that goes. I mean, it's you're running a business, right? And so, are you going to be able to do all those things? And with these conversations that Ann McCoy had with Jimmy that none of us know about, she felt right that I was the right guy, And so the thing is, time will tell. Watching the offense and getting to see it, regardless if it matters or not, because you have, what do we have, 30-something guys going to the portal? I don't even know what it is. So your roster size is going to change over anyway. But it's a completely different offense. You got to change your personnel. It's a lot of tight ends, heavier guys, bigger guys in that sense. Bigger formations. You're going to flip formations, shift, motion. It's a running quarterback. It's a running system. It's a down your face. It's a very physical. You see him on defense, and the way I look at it is like your team's going to take the MO of your head coach, right? And it seems like his philosophy, being a former linebacker, is very physical, down in your face. Defense is that way, vertical, coming at you. Offense is very similar. Right? They're not going to be a lot of trick stuff going around. Yeah, they're going to have some motions and they're going to have some misdirections just off of a jet sweep or whatnot, but it's a very vertical running style offense, right? And so you're going to have to turn your personnel over in that sense, because what we've seen is 4 wide, 5 wide, spread the offense. Mike Leach, what he's done over that system, the air raid or however you want to call it. That type of an offense for the last how many years? I don't even know what the number is. So it's going to be a vastly different offensive mindset and overall game plan of approach when it comes to the Washington State offense. So
I want to go back though because I can sense a little hesitancy about the hire, and I think that's fair.
If people don't have hesitancy about the hire, then something's wrong.
Yeah, right. 100%. 100%. Because I don't think any of us know whether or not it's going to work out, and I think all of us have to acknowledge that it's a risk to hire someone at 37 from the lower level who's only been a head coach for 2 years. Mm-hmm. But I think there would have been a risk with anyone. I think there's a risk with Vegan at Montana State, but he had done it for a longer period of time. But at the same things that were being said about Vegan or about Rogers were said about Vegan, right? Is it really him? He's on the coattails of good head coaches before him, an assistant that was set up. And then let's just say, I know Jim Moore's name was out there. Well, then there would have been the same thing with Jim Moore. Is he really that good of a head coach? He didn't really do all that well at UCLA, and then he goes to UConn, and I guess they got to a bowl game at UConn, his age, and then, of course, that he played at Washington. So there would have been angst among that, right? If Jed Fish leaves, isn't Jim Moore just going to simply take the job at Washington? But going back to Rogers and the hesitancy with the hire, I think the one thing that stood out to me right away was when I saw the contract. Because when I saw the contract and I see him making $1 million less than Jake Dickert, that there was a red flag there to me. Because did she hire the person that she thought was the best fit for Washington State, or did she hire someone because, he's a good coach, but we can also get him on the cheap?
So here's no question, right? You're dealt with so many different scenarios that you have to balance and handle in that AD position, and so that might have been what they could give him, right? The next hire. But look, the back end, the finances, the budgeting with the president and where our school's at right now. I mean, there was rumors that we're getting cut down from 85 scholarships to 75 scholarships, right? I mean, we don't know what is all taking place in this scenario, and so. Yes, there's any fan that cares, any alumni that cares, yourself, myself, other guys that we've talked to, or other quarterbacks that we're close with. We're always going to have questions. Like you're saying, no matter who is going to hire is going to be, we're going to question it. And I think because this kind of came out of left field and nobody really knows who the guy is, of course everybody's going to question it, right? And then to your point, like, hey, okay, here's the contract. Is the reason why they hired him because this is the only guy they could get for this amount of money? You know what I mean? that could possibly be as well too. So it's all going to go into the equation, right? The end all be all question is going to be, can he come in and make the adjustments? Can he be that leader? Can in a trying time of where we are at with the uncertainties of what's taking place coming up next, can he motivate young guys? Can he keep and retain young guys to be focused in that? And he showed as a head coach the last couple of years. I think they won it, 2 years or 1 year with him, and the year prior he was a D coordinator, I believe. Right? So I mean, they've won the whole thing at that level. I don't think it's a huge drop off either, right? But he's had success. He understands what it takes to have success. He understands how to motivate kids. Obviously, the guys, from what it looks like, they play for him. You watch the physical play of the nature of the guys. And I just watched that last game against North Dakota State, right? So I watched that one game film. I'm not truly versed on them. I watched that one game film. But the thing that you see is you see the guys playing for him. You see the passion he has. You see how physical they are. Right? You see how they fought in that game when it was back and forth, up and down. You see all those things. And so those are all things that personally, as a former player, I like, right? I like all those things. Can he translate that over to Washington State and Pullman? Time will tell. Nobody knows, right? Nobody knows. And so the thing is that where I go in these scenarios is, there's going to be change. There's going to be something that's going to happen different. But the thing is that, are we going to sit around and scrutinize every little aspect that he's had in his career, or we should have done this, or could we have done that, or what are we going to do with this? No, or are you just going to sit there and be like, hey, look, let's back our guy, let's go and support let's go and support whatever's going to be here, and let's see what happens, and then 3 to 4 years down the road, hey, that was the wrong move, or hey, that was the best hire ever, right? We don't know until this is going to come out. So that's the way I look at it. Is like, listen, let's see things. It's going to be new. But you know what? Whenever there's growth, there's change, there's uncomfortable. We got to be uncomfortable, right? And so,
absolutely.
And so that's the one thing of us right now. We're uncomfortable. We don't know what the hell is going to happen. We don't know how this is going to take place. And so everybody is a little bit worried about that. But we'll see if that's for the better or for worse. Time will tell.
I want to go and get into the weeds offensively. You kind of touched on it a little bit. Yeah, if you watch South Dakota State play, and you can just go to YouTube and you can find their games, it is a vastly different style than it has been accustomed to Washington State. It is, it's not the air raid. It is the opposite of the air raid. I mean, they do throw the ball and they're out of shotgun, but it's out of shotgun, and it is downhill physical football. How do you think that translates? What jumps off at you about watching that game against North Dakota State? What jumps off at you about what they do offensively?
Well, the size they have of their guys, right? They're tight ends, because they're tight ends. You got to have that versatile player, that tight end, where you can block as well as you can go out there and catch. And some of the players they had, because they're lined up in tight formations, they're lined up in open formations. They're doing all these things, but they're not changing personnel, so they can go fast. Mm-hmm. They're shifting, going unbalanced. They try to put the defense on the heels by doing stuff like that, by going quicker, shifting, going unbalanced, motioning a guy across, and then hitting somebody downhill, right? So they're trying to really overshift you on a certain alignment with your guys up front or your linebackers, send a motion for some eye candy going somewhere, and then come and hit you right down your face, right? Is what they're looking at doing, right? And so the thing is that you have to have those players, that personnel type in order to do that. If you don't have that personnel type, you can't run what they're running, right? Just like the air raid offense, you can't go and run the offense without having the speedsters that you need on the outside, the vertical threats, the slot guys that can get open on the inside, the zone running back that can make guys miss in the open field. You can't go and run it unless you're doing that, and a quarterback that can be very accurate, right? And so with this offense, you got to have a quarterback that could run downhill. You got to have a quarterback that's physical, but you also have a quarterback that, hey, when you need to, you can go and throw that vertical seam. You can throw that ball on the outside. You can throw a corner out. You can see that quarterback, he missed a couple open throws in that game, right? So he's more of a runner than he is a passer. but can he make those plays and those decisions? And does that, obviously it's going to match up to his defense and the style that he has on defense, right? So everything has to marry up, in my opinion, or your offense, your defense, your philosophies on that side. So I think that that's the biggest thing that stood out to me, is that how long is it going to take to find those player, that personnel type? Obviously with the portal nowadays, things can change a lot quicker than they used to, right? Can you get those guys in there, and can you get those guys, performing at that high level as quick as he needs them to do?
Is it similar in a way of how Boise runs their offense?
Very true. Yeah, I mean, I was trying to draw some similarities of who's out there that runs like that. Very similar in that sense. I think Boise throws the ball a little bit more. Their quarterback doesn't run as hard and downhill that he does, or rely on the quarterback as much to run. But yes, I would say Boise is a similar style in that sense.
I bring that up because I know there's going to be fans. They're going to be like, we can't recruit the type of players that they need to run this type of system, because I know that's going to be the reaction. I'll just say two quick things, and I'll let you react. One was, I was happily surprised about the size of South Dakota State.
No doubt.
I looked at their roster. They're a big team.
They have a big team.
They're a big team at a lower level, and I'm like, if I put Washington State on that field with them, I really wouldn't see a big of a difference between the size of those guys. I want people to go look at their roster, and I would specifically have you look at their wide receivers and their tight ends. Those are some big dudes. Yeah. And then the other thing is, if Boise can recruit to that, I think Washington State can recruit to that. And so I just know that there's going to be this initial reaction, Gesser, from people like, we can't play that style because we can't recruit to that. What do you make of that? What do you say?
Well, here's the thing. At the end of the day, it's what are we doing with our NIL, right? What are we doing at our facilities? We've got the indoor now, right? So what kind of backing are you going to have in order to recruit those guys? And the thing is what we all know and what we've all thought of Washington State to be, right? Knowing when I was playing with the Mike Price eras, we'd go and bring in those 3-star guys, or those guys that were, the Josh Parrish, Ryan Long type guys, right? Where they came in as freaking tight ends. Right, they came in as tight ends, and one ended up as an Outland Trophy D tackle, and the other one ended up as one of our best freaking tackles, offense tackles that we've ever had. Right, so it's like you sit there and you say, okay, well, can you bring in those type of guys?
Yeah, we
brought those type of guys in forever, right? But now the game has changed. So who do you see as more, in my opinion? I look at it like, do you see it more high maintenance of, hey, we got to bring in high level receivers, right? Or do you start bringing in, hey, we got a guy that can play D end or tight end. We have a guy that can be versatile. We have a guy that you know what, he's a tweener here, so we're gonna go and grab him there, right? And we're not gonna have to spend as much money on a high name receiver, because we don't need that. We need to have this instead, right? And so I think that you can go and recruit those guys, and I think it does fit to where we almost are going in that sense a little bit better. And how much backing do you truly have from your school and from the Cougar Collective to go and get the guys that you need, And can your coach recruit them and talk them to coming in and stay in there, right? That's two of the biggest things right now is, can you recruit, can you retain, right? Who are you bringing with you, right? That's because without those things, it's almost irrelevant,
Yeah. Do you like this style of play offensively? I'm going to ask you your thoughts defensively, what they do and what stands out to you, because obviously that's his calling card is defense. Do you like this style of offense? When we did our QB speakeasy, we were talking about legacy of you guys and John Mateer and all that. Yeah. I was kind of taken aback when I asked you guys that did not play in the air raid, hey, would you guys like to play in the air raid? And you were like, no. Because I loved the offense that we played in, because it was more balanced. And you said it was physical. We had tight ends and we ran the football. This seems, even though it looks a little different because they're out of the shotgun a lot, that it's getting back to more of that. And I would assume that you would prefer that style more.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is what's going to help you. I've always gone to the place of what's your personnel going to fit you with, right? And so if your personnel, if you feel like you're able to get those type of guys and have that type of a system, and you have that time to be able to do that, then yeah, I'm going to lead to whatever that personnel matches. And so, and then whatever matches up with your defense, because you gotta have both sides marrying up. You know, in my opinion, when Leach was there with Grinch, right, and that defensive style and the offensive style, they knew how to push and pull off each other, right? Grinch knew when he had to be more aggressive, when he had to sit back. How was the offense going? And so he played to that style of Hare. How are we going to win this game? What's the best way to approach this game to win from a defensive state of mind and an offensive state of mind, right? And so I think that's the biggest thing, in my opinion, is how do you marry your offense and your defense together? And will your offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator be willing to make the adjustments needed and have that push and pull back and forth of, hey, yeah, you know what? This game may suck for us defensively, but here's how we're going to play. And because we know our offense is going to be able to do X or Y, and we're going to end up winning the game. Whether we win by 3 or we win by 30, it doesn't freaking matter. We won the game, right? And so that's my biggest thing is how is that going to marry up? And so can he have that relationship with whoever his offensive coordinator is going to be? Does he call it on defense? I don't know if he calls it on defense or not, or if he's the head guy, right? I know he's a defensive guy, but is he going to be that guy, or are they going to marry those two guys together and make sure they work together? Because that's the biggest thing.
What do you see from them defensively? And again, I know you're just watching the one game of North Dakota State, but what stood out to you?
Yeah, again, they're downhill. They're aggressive, right? I mean, they got kind of beat behind each other, or got beat behind on some deep balls because of how aggressive they are, and how downhill they come. I mean, a lot of tackles for loss in the backfield, linebackers shooting gaps. They read very, very well, right? They're in tier 7. They read extremely well. When they see a pulling guard, a pulling tackle, they are firing on all cylinders, right? So they're reading. Their eyes aren't caught in the backfield like most guys kind of get tendencies to do. So I think they're very disciplined in that sense, and they're very physical. So those are the two things when I watched that game that stood out to me. It's like they are physical, number 1, and they are disciplined, number 2, right? Those are the two things that I saw.
The quarterback, he's in the portal, Mark Gronowski. There's some thought that he'd go to the NFL. Also some thought maybe he'd come back and play another year of college football. Obviously, with his head coach going to Washington State, the natural thought is he'll go to Washington State. But we'll see. Give me an evaluation of what you saw, again, just in that one game from him.
Yeah, I saw a leader out there is what I saw, right? I mean, they're in a big game on the road, big rival against another powerhouse team, right? And he was the guy leading them up and down the field and making the plays when they needed to be made, right? And so I think that's the biggest thing I saw from him. And I don't know what his true size was. I didn't look him up on his true size, but he plays big. Like he plays like a big boy. Like, and he can run, he can take it down, and he'll hit you in the face. And so, like I mentioned earlier, obviously the throwing side of things. I think he needs to clean up some of that and get more accurate. Again, I'm watching one game, so I'm going off of the things I saw him in that one game. But he was a leader. Like the guys are playing for him. He was getting guys up on the sideline. I'm just going off the TV camera angles, where they're at. I pick up on little things that a lot of guys don't look at, right? And so whether the linemen are doing with him when he's getting picked up off the pile or things of that nature. And so you saw the guys playing for him. And so when you see that and you see the way that he was communicating, you see the way things were going, I see him as a leader, and whether that's true or not, that's what I saw. So. Yeah.
All right, last thing. Biggest adjustment you think for Jimmy Rogers as he heads up to the next level?
It's a good question. The biggest adjustment, I think, for him is going to end up, I don't know how big of a deal the NIL deal is with the FCS. I truly don't. Are they dealing with NIL as well too, or is it just, hey, we're going off of motivation, we're going off of the old school, hey, we gotta be a team, we gotta be a family, we stick around, fight for each other, type of a deal, because that NIL thing is a monster in itself, and ended some coaches' careers because they don't want to deal with it, right? I mean, coaches have gone into retirement early because they're like, I don't want to deal with this, right? It's not who I am. It's not who I want to be. And so I do know a handful of coaches that have taken hard stances on it where like, I'm not going to put up with this. And it just hasn't gone over very well, right? Is he going to be that guy that comes in and says, no, this is my way or the highway. We're not dealing with NIL. We're going to have one thing. We're going to be whatever it is, right? Or is he going to be a guy that, hey, no, I know how to wrangle this whole NIL deal, and I know how to go and motivate guys, and I'm going to be able to balance things out with paying guys the right amount. I'm going to put the right guys together in the back end with the Cougar Collective and help out, whatever it may be, right? And so I think that's going to be the biggest adjustment that he has to put in is how are we going to handle the NIL deal? How are we going to handle getting guys here in that sense and retaining guys, and how quickly can we do that, right? Because everybody's going to want it to happen ASAP. Because I'll tell you this right now, right? We're gonna have a new Pac-12 this next year, correct? Mm-hmm. Is it this next year taking place?
26.
26, right? So
we got one more year of like independent ball, barnstorming.
Yes, yeah. So we have one more year of this, right? So he almost has like a warm-up year.
Sure.
Because by that second year, if we're going out there and we're going to be in the middle of the new pack or the bottom of the new pack because we're trying to get stride and figure out who we are and trying to bring players in, and it's going to be the second year of his tenure, right? And if that's going to happen during that place, man, that's not going to be good, right? Because he has to understand, I've got this next year to get my ducks in order, to get my personnel right, to bring the right guys in, to understand this whole NIL, because that very next year, you know as very well as I do, all the Coug fans are expecting what? To win the whole damn thing.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, we're expected to win. If we're not expecting to win the whole damn thing, then what are we doing? Right? And the expectation is that that's going to take place. And if we're in the middle of that pack, if we're in the lower end of that pack, that's not going to go well.
Yeah.
Right? It's not going to go well. So,
well, we'll see.
Anyway.
Yeah, we'll see. Hey, great insight, Gesser. Love having you on. Great insight. This has been fun. The Who is Jimmy Rogers episode. I want to thank Kyle Sheehan, who joined us earlier, Splitting Hares podcast. Go check out that. He covers JackRabbits football. You can follow him at Splitting Hares. And, of course, the great Jason Gesser. Pac-10 Offensive Player of the Year back in 2002, giving perspective on the Rodgers hire. Also, what they're going to do offensively, which is going to be so vastly different from what you've seen from about a decade plus. The Jimmy Rogers, Who is Jimmy Rogers episode in the books on YouTube. When you're there, please subscribe there. If you are listening to it, of course, you know where all those podcast platforms are. Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts. And, of course, always up at pucksports.com. I want to thank our sponsors. The Cougar Collective, go donate now, please. Cougar Collective could use the help. We all could use the help. And also Flat Stick Pub. For Jason Gesser and Kyle Sheehan, I'm Jason Puckett. We'll talk to you down the road. Thank you for watching and listening. If it's fun you desire, it's fun you're going to get at Flat Stick Pub. It doesn't matter what the occasion is, whether it's date night, guys night, ladies night, or large group event, Flat Stick Pub's got you covered. They have 6 great locations across the Pacific Northwest, from Pioneer Square to Kirkland, South Lake Union, Spokane, Bellingham, and Redmond. All locations offer the best pub experience in Washington. 2 rules at Flat Stick Pub: drink local and have fun. Pretty simple. So if you like to have fun, love local beer, and great tasting food, make Flat Stick Pub your next spot. Visit them at flatstickpub.com.